It is just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Gordon and Rella, the two people who do not need an introduction, but I'll introduce them anyway, to come talk about the emergency situation of COVID-19 affecting dentistry. Gordon J. Christian is founder and director of Practical Clinical Courses, CEO of Clinicians Report Foundation, and a practicing prosthodontist in Provo, Utah. Gordon and Rella Christian are co-founders of the nonprofit Clinicians Report Foundation that I grew up thinking it was known CRA, but now it's Clinicians Report Foundation, which Rella directed for many years. Since 1976, they have conducted research in all areas of dentistry and published the findings to the profession in the well-known CRA Newsletter, now called Clinicians Report. Gordon's degrees include University of Southern California, MSD, University of Washington, PhD, University of Denver, and 2 honorary doctorate. Early in his career, Gordon helped initiate the University of Kentucky. It just goes on and on. Dr. Rella Christian co-founded the CRA in '76 and for 27 years directed this well-known dental product testing institute. Subsequently, she served as chairman of its board. Currently, she is a team leader of a nonprofit institute dedicated to in-depth and long-term clinical studies of restorative materials, dental caries, preventive dentistry, known as Technologies in Restoratives and Caries Research, TRAC Research. In 1960, Rella Christian received a Bachelor of Science in Dental Hygiene from the University of Southern California and practiced dental hygiene for 25 years. She worked as a dental laboratory technician for 3 years. She founded the bachelor's degree program for the University of Colorado. She earned a PhD in physiology and an emphasis on microbiology for Brigham Young University in 1986, and that is the reason she completed a postgraduate course in anaerobic microbiology at Virginia Polytech State University. She has presented over 1,040 dental continuing education programs, totaling 5,200 hours at U.S. and international locations. She has made 7 videos on control of infectious diseases in the dental offices, which have been in universities and clinical practices worldwide. So, Rella, my gosh, you guys are the modern day equivalents of G.V. Black and Pierre Fichard all wrapped up into one marriage. So the dentists have never seen anything like this. And I'm getting feedback even from a friend of yours up the street in Utah, Dan Fisher. I mean, he said that when the ADA said that they recommended that we only go to emergency treatments, the phones have stopped ringing and dentistry is at a standstill. So they want to hear from you. What do you guys, ladies first, it's St. Patrick's Day. So Rella, my first question to you is, St. Patrick drove all the snakes out of Ireland. Can he drive the coronavirus out too?
Apparently not.
Well, you've been studying microbiology in dental offices longer than anybody who's listening to this program right now. What is your take on this COVID-19 coronavirus?
Well, it is a real first in dentistry, but it's been something that we have anticipated. Anybody who studied microbiology, even as an undergraduate student, was taught that a serious particularly viral pandemic was always around the corner. Most of the people who are listening to this presentation have already lived through a tremendous pandemic with the AIDS.
36 million people died with the AIDS pandemic.
And it's still very much alive and going. They've lived through, of course, SARS and MERS and Ebola, and there are going to be others. This is one. It's not going to be the last one. There is a certain amount of fear because we don't have good numbers on the death rate. It isn't so much the infection rate as the death rate, and it varies from country to country. We won't really know good numbers on that until, frankly, everything is kind of settled and over. And it does make good sense to close things down. I know that the leadership in China was criticized for that because there are about 50 million people in several large cities. But it's about all you can do is try to isolate people so that it doesn't spread. And it isn't forever. It's for a period of weeks or months, and this too will subside, but it'll be back. I promise you it will be back. This virus will circulate for years.
Tell them when it'll be back. It's predictable.
Well, it'll be back in the fall, even if there is a vaccine. The problem with viruses is they really aren't alive in the sense of the word. They can't really do anything until they enter your cell. And there they take over the machinery that makes protein in your cell, the DNA, RNA apparatus, and they make viruses, which are then released in various ways. This happens to be what we call an envelope virus, and so they do take a bit of the envelope of the cell with them, which is part of the protein. Happily, that means that they're easier to inactivate with disinfectants and the sort. But unhappily, it means that they circulate very, very easily. This has been the problem with this, is they're very easily transmitted from person to person. And in the fall, we won't know if they mutate up or down. But even with a vaccine, for example, most of you probably remember what was called the Mexican flu or the swine flu, out of the respect for pigs and for the country of Mexico. They finally just gave up and called it H1N1. And some people may not realize that those two letters stand for the proteins that are part of the virus, the hemagglutinin and the neuraminidase. And when you've got a 1 after them, it means it's a first time around circulation. And that always means that we don't have immunity, which means it's going to be more dangerous. So that's it in a nutshell. I think
Rella, when you were saying it was going to come back in the fall, are you expecting this coronavirus to be seasonal? I mean, we hear that they live year-round in the tropics, but in North America, is it seasonal? Do you expect this one to be seasonal, burn out in the summer heat and come back in the fall?
Other coronaviruses, there are many in that categorization. And they do tend, for reasons that nobody knows for sure, but are hypothetical, that things tend to slow down, not necessarily go away, but slow down in the hotter months. That would be July and August, maybe June. But you'll notice with the H1N1 that particular virus starts earlier in the year. We used to think the virus season went from October until about April, whereas the H1N1, it has tended to start long about late August and September. So we're going to have to see. But generally with the warmer weather, and bear in mind the warmer weather comes different times of the year in different parts of the globe. When it's nice and warm up here in the northern hemisphere, it's cold in the southern and vice versa. So people traveling could face very different situations depending on where they go. But I think the important take-home lesson is to know that it's going to circulate. It's not going away. Even with a vaccine, there's a good element of control, but it doesn't mean annihilation, because the virus will mutate and be able to work around the vaccine.
Gordon, did you want, another thing is the infection control. So right now, the ADA and all these states aren't saying, no one's told everyone to stop. I mean, we're still doctors. Not everything is elective. The hospitals are open. They're open for emergencies until they're told not to, is what everyone is saying. But the CDC guidelines on infection control, a lot of people are confused, and I wanted to know if you could clear it up. I posted yesterday a study where human coronaviruses can remain infectious on inanimate surfaces for up to 9 days. Surface infection with 0.1% sodium hypochlorite or 62 to 71% ethanol significantly reduces coronavirus infectivity on surfaces within 1 minute of exposure.
That's
Well, that was from Professor Gunter Kampf in Germany. What if someone's seeing, if your staff's concerned that we don't know who's sick and you're seeing an emergency, does this change any of the infection protocol? Or is what Gordon and you guys were saying at the beginning that we've been getting stronger and stronger from the HIV outbreak in '89, SARS, MERS, H1N1, and this COVID-19, we're ready for it with what we're already doing with universal precautions? Or does this call for more?
Let me give you an idea. In front of you now is a special report. It's going out as I speak, and we have spent a long time getting it together. This will come, if you want it, from Clinicians Report, one long word, Clinicians Report, all lowercase, .org. And what have we got in there? We've got a heading, as you can see, and then it follows up with a whole list. I won't hold it up. You can't read it anyway. A whole list of practical do's and don'ts. And we've gleaned that from many, many articles. In fact, on this piece, which is 4 or 5 pages, you will have more than, well, we've got about 7 or 8 references for you that you may want to take the time to look at, since ADA is saying take 3 weeks off except for emergencies. And I would strongly suggest you read some of those because you have to make your own opinions. All we're doing is reading them using Rella's expertise, and she is an international authority, and trying to make some conclusions. I will say very candidly, and I hope you're hearing it, and I hope CDC hears it. I was just on the phone 30 minutes ago with John Suzuki, who's an immunologist for the CDC and is head of dental FDA. Most of you know John. You've heard him speak. He's very honest, well respected. So he's even disturbed. I can't speak for him, but he's disturbed about the CDC recommendations. In a minute, I'm going to have Rella take over and tell you how she feels about that. The CDC recommendations are, I'm going to say it, back many years. And when you hear her speak, you'll hear that. So she's going to give you some practical information. Also in this piece is a very, very practical orientation or directed right at dentists. And there are many things that are being said that are wrong. I'll just give you a typical example. If I bump her with my coat here, guess what? 6, 7, 8 days, I'll still carry the stupid virus. There are many theories going about. I just had one presented to me several hours ago. Thick pieces of mail that might come to you. The virus, we think from the research, is staying on thick pieces of paper for several days. Is that how it's getting into homes? Should we be wearing gloves to open the mail? We have no idea. Bottom line is there are quite a few things going on. I'm highly concerned about the hysteria that has been created by the press. And Rella has her strong opinions about the press, as I do. They exacerbated this to the point where you have no idea what to do. There's confounding suggestions. This thing that CR has put together, Niles Harrod, a very, very educated and well-known oral surgeon, has been the lead author, and there have been another 15 of us that have been gleaning information and putting the information into it. I suggest you go to Clinicians Report, one long word, .org, and pull this thing up. It'll come to you either late tonight.
Who was the expert you recommended? John Suzuki? Who?
Niles Harrod is on our staff. Yes, he's an oral surgeon.
How do you spell his name? Niall.
Niles, Niles Herod, Herrod. He's the one that has been responsible for putting this together, along with myself, Derek Hine, and many other people who have contributed. It's directed straight at dentists. It's looked at do's and don'ts for practice. It's got prevention, do's and don'ts. What's the best thing on your elective procedures? You know, most of them don't have a face mask that's adequate. That's an example. And then it goes into the lay public for your family. What about self-protection? And there are about 25 points there, some of which directly refute what's being told to you. So I suggest you look at that. I'm concerned that the public was misinformed over and over and over again by the press. Just this morning on Fox, you probably saw, however, this, we don't know whether we believe it or not, but they're claiming they had a man on who lives in China, and a Caucasian, and he's directly stating that they're now going back to work. A person in my church unit has companies all over China. I met with him over the weekend, and he's claiming that his operations are back to full right now. He said there's still limitations. They're still being quarantined if they had positive characteristics. But he's thinking, and I talked with John Suzuki about this minutes ago.
That's what I was asking about. You said John Suzuki? How do you spell, just like it sounds, Suzuki?
John, Jon. Suzuki,
Jon.
Suzuki, Suzuki. John teaches perio in our hands-on courses, and he and I are giving courses right now on implant failure, which is another major crisis going in the profession at this moment. Hands-on, you learn how to take care of that, neither here nor there. So if you look at the practical do's and don'ts for practice, I think you'll get enough out of that to pay for the time going to the internet. We would like to state that pretty strongly the best prevention is to suspend all elective procedures. That's the ADA. That is basically CDC. So we're stating, get your fanny out of there, and even when you go in, you better use proper control on yourself, and that's listed in this handout as well. That's going to the whole profession as soon as we can get it there.
But how much? But what letter grade would you give the 211,000 living licensed dentists in America with their current universal precautions that they've been using since HIV, SARS, MERS, H1N1 as we go into this new COVID?
I'll tell you my opinion and turn it over to Rella. She has been laboring on this half her life, doing research on organisms that are difficult to kill, polio, tuberculosis, where most of the tests that have been promoted to you and me have been done on organisms I could do that with and kill. Rella, take over.
Oh, dear. One of the problems has been the inadequacy of the very products that we depend on to protect ourselves. You're definitely going to want to employ eye covering and a mask that has a tight peripheral fit all the way around, and not just over the nose, so that there's no leakage around the periphery of it. And there are only two brand names out there right now, by Prostec and by Alpha Protec, that make that kind of a mask. It's been covered by a patent for many years. All of you, I know that are listening in are aware that gloves have manufacturing leaks, and this is the reason for considering double gloving, because it would be unusual where two holes would actually overlap each other. Not impossible, but unusual. So we've had infection control products that really don't meet the expectations of the clinicians. And this is what we worked so long on, starting back in 1980, frankly, up to the present. Anything that a dental office was using in infection control has been through a lot of hands-on testing, both clinically and in our lab with actual organisms. At TRAC Research, we're set up with a very sophisticated microbiology capability and technology, and this has been going on for years. And we've taken these findings to the IADR and AADR, that would be the international and American research community. But it's been difficult. Howard, you asked how well we've done in dentistry. And frankly, I'm going to use one of the best examples of that. And that would be the pre-wet wipes that come in a can, where you pick them up much like a Kleenex tissue dispensing. This type of a product was originally brought on the market many years ago to wipe children's hands and to wipe babies' butts, if you will, and has never really been designed for healthcare, and particularly any kind of a surgical or hospital type of thing, but has been brought in by the women who use them at home. And to try to convince people that these really are inappropriate has been impossible to do, because they love the convenience, they love the smell, but they don't kill. And if you went down the line, this has been a problem historically with every single product, starting with eye covering, going to face mask, going to the kind of clothing that's worn. These things that you call scrubs are really not scrubs. They are the underclothes worn under a true surgical scrub.
Let me interrupt you for a second. CDC recommends high neck and long sleeves. I'll bet 1% of you listening to this are doing that. I made an infection control video a while ago taking the CDC requirements, and I know I'm getting myself in trouble saying what I'm saying, but we polled the profession to see how many of those CDC requirements were being accepted by the profession. See, that's a problem. We need more real-world people who've actually walked in your shoes and gone through 20, 30, 40 patients in a day. If I did all of those things exactly as they promote, that's all I would do. It would be my hobby. There would be no revenue. So we know we have problems there. And while I have the floor for just a second, on one of the pages of this handout, I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to promote Rella's stuff. Under disinfection, listen carefully, because you got to read through this a little bit. We need no more lawsuits. Use disinfectant to wipe debris first. You know, you're told to wipe it off with whatever. Use disinfectant to wipe debris, then disinfect again. There was 2 disinfectants. You'll get detail on this. Use disposable gloves and elective wipes and sprays. Now, listen carefully. Preferred CDC disinfectant is blah, 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 blah. You know it as well as I. It is hypochlorite, it is hydrogen peroxide, it's benzalkonium chloride, and they're claiming chlorhexidine is not effective. It is effective for some aspects. The Suzuki is upset with that one as well. So anyway, then there is an asterisk that leads you to, how many of your publications have we put in?
Oh,
5 or 6.
Yeah.
5 or 6. Several peer-reviewed ones right out of JADA and so forth. So please, when you get this thing, take a look at what CDC is saying, and I respect CDC. Others that are getting on there now will hopefully get us some more accurate information, but then read some of the research that uses more virulent organisms and viruses.
Well, Howard, the problem, it always, the discussion seems to always center on disinfectants, but I'll tell you honestly, in talking about this situation, I feel there are three levels. The first level is your immune system. There's the best infection control that you have. And I think in America, we don't get enough sleep to rejuvenate our bodies at night. And there are a lot of things that people do that is tough on their body. So remember your immune system is your first line of defense. And certainly healthcare providers being up to date in all of the adult vaccines. Those are listed on the CDC website. We could send them to you electronically as well. The second most important thing, now this is my opinion, in the transmission of particularly viruses and of this type is going to be the air that you breathe and the aerosols that we generate as dental clinicians with any kind of an air-driven instrument. What we're really doing is kicking up the saliva in the oral cavity. And when you do that I can't even describe to you the amount of material that enters the air, particularly when multiple clinicians are practicing at the same time.
May I interrupt you just one second, and I'll go back to you. We did a study just a while ago on air purifiers, and you wouldn't believe how many we got in our house, 5 or 6?
Yes.
And every time she cleans them, it's just putrid. So we did a study on it recently, and then we got with several of the major air purifier, air filter companies, and dentists and dental staff and veterinaries have the most polluted offices of any workers, including sewer workers. So what she's saying
And
is,
what was it? Dentists, vets, and who?
dentists, dental staff, and veterinaries are second. We're first. We're the worst ones. In a dental office, you have all these droplets that she's just been describing, and they're loaded with organisms. That's why your office smells pretty putrid after just a few years from collecting all this stuff in drapes and carpets and chairs. And
on walls and
on
cupboards
everywhere. So to say that we're in a sterile environment is a joke. In fact, the Chinese, after this major episode they've been through, have said clearly, don't even see a dentist unless it's just a dire emergency, because we have this stuff floating everywhere. Go ahead.
Well, I was talking about the priorities in trying to operate in a dental office. I mentioned, first of all, your immune system, to take better care of ourselves, particularly getting enough sleep. Secondly, was the air quality, and years ago we studied this quite in detail. There is an organization, we refer to it as ASHRAE. It has to do with air quality in general and all types of buildings, how much circulation and so on should be there. And again, dentistry is a problem because of the aerosols that we can't help but create. So the question is how to clean them up. And Gordon is correct. I do use air filtration in our home and also in our clinics, in our microbiology lab. We use virtual clean room HEPA filter system. I don't think that's necessary in a dental office, but I think we can do a lot better. And also it has to do, believe it or not, with something as everyday important as your high velocity suction. Learning to suction properly can take care of a huge percentage of those aerosols, over 90% of them. And by properly, what I'm saying here is that the suction tip needs to be opposite the instrument, whether it's a water-cooled handpiece or whether it's an ultrasonic scaler or whether it's something like a Profi jet. And we don't operate that way. Usually the assistance will come in from the top and actually suction the coolant, water, and so on off before it ever hits the tooth. But what you want to be, if the doc is operating from the facial, that suction needs to come from the lingual to pull that water right across the tooth. So, and we have a little test. We worked with engineers on how can a dentist know if his suction is adequate. And all you need is a liter bottle. It can be an old pop bottle. It can be a milk bottle, a liter bottle that's empty, and fill it up with tap water, and turn all of your suction off in all of your operatories but one. I would go into whatever you consider your main operatory, turn on the suction, and put the tip into the bottle, and the actual bottle should be emptied in about 8 seconds if your suction is adjusted so that it's not too high, so that you suction out last Thanksgiving dinner, and it's not too low so that you can't take care of a lot of these aerosols. So there's your air quality.
But you said the suction needs to be, just succinctly again, the suction needs to be at the same angle as the high speed or the Profi, the hygienist Profi?
It needs to be opposite it, so that it's coming across the tooth, and you're picking up everything, but you need to be close and you need to be opposite the handpiece. You don't want to take the handpiece coolant water and suction it off before it cools the tooth. And a lot of assistants do that. If you look under magnification, you'll see the water never touches the tooth. So the assistant follows the dentist. The dentist goes where he needs to go to have access, and the assistant follows and tries to be opposite wherever the point of interest of the dentist is with the suction. And then, like I said, the suction needs to have enough suck, but not too much. That would be 8 seconds for a liter. Just time it with your phone. See if you can make that work. And then the third area is the things that you touch. And in this case, this isn't always true, but in this case, this virus is transmitted on surfaces, and that's where things start to get scary, because we all touch everything. And
when she walked in here, she wiped the chair, wiped everything before she even sat down.
I know, but that's because I'm a microbiologist, and we're all crazy. So I understand everybody can't act like that.
I live with it.
But you would be surprised what you touch. One of the first things that you learn as a microbiologist in 101 as you walk into lab is don't touch your face. And I'm glad to see that that's being transmitted by the experts that are being interviewed, and it's making its way into the press. Don't touch your eyes, nose, mouth, because all of these are major portals of entry for viruses. And as far as this virus is concerned, I think another thing that's a little frightening about it is that it can be so mild. We just had a case right here in Utah. Somebody at Park City, they'd come in to ski. They met some friends at a bar in Park City, and a person was at the front door to check IDs. And that person happened to be COVID-19 positive and didn't know it, had come to work sick that way, and touched everyone's ID, breathed on those people. And this woman describes it in one of our local newspapers here, about how they went in and sat with friends in the bar for maybe an hour, and how that was on March 7, which was a Saturday. And by the middle of the next week, every one of them was positive for the virus. But the symptoms they were having, Howard, were like a cold. They had body aches and pains and chills, headache, malaise, and weren't really having any just critical chest congestion and so on, but they were having a nasal discharge. And yet every one of them within about 4 to 5 days were testing positive from that brief encounter. And this woman that they'd interviewed was saying that what was frightening was just how easily it was transmitted. All of this happened without anybody guessing there was a problem on Saturday night, March 7th.
Let me add something.
Well, the Hinman meeting looks like a genius. They shut it down, and the Vancouver Dental Conference went on, and they had 4 new cases, and now Dr. Bonnie Henry is asking all dentists in British Columbia to self-isolate for 14 days.
Gosh.
So there is no dentistry available in British Columbia from a dental conference.
You know, the thing that's frightening, I think, to any dentist, Howard, and to any person, is you have team members and staff members, and the payroll goes on, but the income is going to be suspended. Even if you had your practice open, we're finding a number of patients are canceling anyway, just trying to see what direction are things going to go here. As a person that works with viruses and works in this area all the time, I can tell you from what it looks to me is that we are in the beginning tail of the curve. It'll probably peak, I'm guessing, pure guess, I'm guessing end of April, early May.
That's what everybody's predicting.
And then it'll start to gradually go down, and you'll have another tail that'll last all summer. And about the time that you're feeling pretty good about things,
It comes back.
The fall will be here, and you'll be into needing to get the flu vaccine for influenza A and B. And most likely this guy will circulate too. So I think the take-home lesson is to come up with strategies that allow you to live with it, because that's what we're going to have to do right now.
So again on the seasonalness, you think it's going to start contracting, slowing down when, and when do you expect it to pick up, and how did you word that?
Well, the way I said it is that this is just strictly my opinion based on what we know about viruses and epidemics. But here, I'm only talking about here. I'm not talking about other countries. I'm talking about what's going on here in the U.S. right now. It looks like we are in the beginning tail of a true bell curve. And that the peak of that curve, I'm going to estimate, is going to be end of April, early May, or maybe even a little later into May. And I'm hoping that we'll be seeing the ending tail as June, July, August. In August, you're going to have to look at the beginning
Again.
at the beginning of a tail of influenza A and B. Let's look at H1N1. We touched on that and then got off of it. The swine flu, Mexican flu, H1N1, whatever you call it.
Well, what are all the names for? What did you say? What names?
Well, it started being called the Mexican flu. Then it was called the swine flu. And finally, they just said, look, let's just call it H1N1. But it was all the same flu. It was about 10 years ago, and we are still receiving strains of that in our yearly vaccines. These viruses don't just come and go, they circulate and they mutate. And they keep moving. And what causes their mutation is as they move through people, they're picking up different components of lots of different people's DNA. This particular virus happens to be an RNA virus, but the same principles apply because the human cell makes both DNA and RNA, the RNA manufacturing the actual proteins. So Um, we're going to have to learn how to cope better on a daily basis. I doubt people are going to be anxious to shake hands or to kiss.
No, sure not.
They're going to be a lot more conscious of the things that they touch. I mean,
do you think this coronavirus is why no one's ever swiped right on my Tinder profile?
Could be. It absolutely could be, but
it's all coming together now. So, Rella, but what would you be advising? Again, this country, North America, where you have this background of experience. Would you do only emergency dentistry? Would you do elective dentistry, or would it only be emergency, or would you self-isolate?
Well, honestly, Howard, what everybody is waiting for right now is to see the direction of things, looking at the momentum, how quickly it's going to pick up. It's not going to go away right now. And we're looking at the momentum to try to estimate where we're going from here. The only way to slow the momentum is honestly to close down so that people don't have people-to-people contact, and that's very difficult to do. So,
well, financially, it's a killer.
Oh, it is.
And as far as economics is concerned, to me, this looks like 9/11, Lehman's brother, and the Y2K all into one. It looks like the perfect trifecta.
No, absolutely, because nobody knows how long it's going to last. But I would say I certainly would do only emergency dentistry between now and the end of the month. See the way things are going. I don't know that people are going to want to come in.
They're not.
They are. My office is open today, and they're still coming in just saying, okay, there's 19 reported cases. There's no deaths. It's all hysteria. It's all hype. I don't have any employees who don't want to work. I don't have any patients who don't want to come in. I'm going back there right after this.
That's not the case for everybody, Howard.
Right.
There are states right now, I just heard this morning, of some that are going to be paying unemployment to staff members, Iowa being among them. They will not compensate the dentist. They only the staff members. So I've canceled everything out for the next 2 weeks. We're going to be watching, and obviously I'm an entrepreneur. We run courses all over the world. There've been over 20 major dental meetings canceled, including Hinman, the most major one of those. We've canceled many of our courses in practical clinical courses. We are going digital, and I mean, they will be true digital programs where you can interact with them. Our first one is one of our restorative courses coming up the end of next week, and that will be all digital. They can sit at home and watch it and have questions, and I see the future very, very clearly on that, because there's so many things you touch. You think about it. This morning, as I got up, knowing I was going to do this little thing with you tonight, I counted the times I touched something before I even got in the car, and it was 25 times that I actually touched something. And you heard Rella on an inanimate credit card. Think that one over. Inanimate object. How many of those have you touched? I went out for lunch today, and I was very conscious of it. I had to touch the handle. How many 100 people touched the door handle to go into that restaurant? And think about what's on that door handle. Rella and I were in charge of a religious center many years ago. We had 1,000 visitors a day, and I was even conscious of it then. I wouldn't touch that right hand during that entire day. I wouldn't touch myself, because some of them were wet hands, some of them were dry hands, some of them looked like they had disease on them. Unbelievable. You touch things all day long. That was just the morning for me before going to work. I don't know if I counted everything all day. It would be several hundred touches, not knowing.
But Gordon, to be clear, is your advice to stop elective treatment now? And what about, would you stop emergency care too?
I don't think you can read that, but here's our exact statement. Prevention, practical do's and don'ts. The best prevention is to suspend all elective procedures. And they're doing that in dermatology, they're doing it in ophthalmology, unless you've really got a sincere challenge. One of the states, and I don't want to get involved with the politics there, the governor has stated that although they have 3 or 4 reported cases, I can't remember the number, it was very small, that his medical advisors claim there must be thousands of people in that state that are already infected.
Well, Howard, look what I described.
They think they have a cold.
Yeah, look what I described about the lady that went to the bar. I mean, you know, what these are symptoms that I think a lot of people experience relatively often. Body aches, headache, malaise. I mean, we're not talking here sore throat. We're not talking fever.
Lung problems.
We're not talking congestion. I mean, these were pretty mild symptoms, and yet she tested positive, and most people would power through that. And
but will the person she infects be mild? There's the bottom line.
Problem. See, you just don't know. And it is a shutdown forever. Howard, it's a shutdown for a period of time to cause a gap, to hopefully stop
fewer transmissions.
Yeah, so you're looking at a period of a few weeks. You're not looking at a period of a half a year, or what Gordon and you started talking about with China. If you look at that, if people are going back to work now, it started in December, so they had December, January, February. And now in March, they're starting to go back again. That's 3 months time.
That's very, very encouraging. And I don't know whether it's still on Fox, but I go back and forth with Fox and CNN, and it's like totally different inspections of a given topic. But at least Fox was saying this morning, as I mentioned when we started, this man who actually lives there is stating that they're definitely on the downside now. They have only 1 case yesterday, and it used to be hundreds just not very many days ago. So it looks like they're on the downside, and relatives predicted when we will be on the downside.
Well, I would hate to say I predicted. That makes me some kind of super expert, but that would be a reasonable amount of time for that bell curve to develop and then begin to subside. But
well, think about it. You're undoubtedly seeing at least 20 patients with hygiene. In my heyday, I was seeing up to 70 a day with all the staff. And multiply that out to their family of an average of 4, and then multiply the 4 out to others, and you see it's exponential. So,
question for you, Howard: Are your schools in Arizona closed?
Yeah, the schools have closed. They closed Monday, so all the schools have closed.
Same with you.
What's that?
Same with Utah. They closed Monday, and they're going digital.
Almost every state.
Uh-huh.
But if you log on to Dental Town right now, I mean, I've been on that every day since actually today, St. Patrick's Day. We actually launched it on St. Patrick's Day in 1999. So this is this is our 21-year anniversary, and my gift is talking to you two. But if you go to today's active topics, my gosh, every single thread, there's 2,000 posts a day just on coronavirus, and it's kind of the politics of fear. I mean, it's just fear. I mean, they've never lived through a pandemic, and they're panicking.
In my opinion, Howard, they could have given a clearer picture of
the government
of what the symptoms were, and what they could be if they were mild and moderate and severe. And of course, it is true that we were caught shy in this country as far as to have a quick test. They have a test, but it's not a quick test. It takes some laboratory work, and so you can run the test, but then you have a big backup in the lab until they can do the chemistry that develops the test. And so it's easy to criticize. I've heard heard a lot of criticism of, well, we shut the borders down too late, but then I heard, well, we shut them down too early. I don't think that's the point. I think honestly the point is that people are afraid because they don't know what to believe. But I think it's been well established that there are a lot of cases that aren't being reported and that are mild.
They're cold, quote.
And people would power on if it weren't for going and
so I hate to keep holding you to the floor, but yes or no, if would you self-isolate right now for the next 2 weeks, or would you see emergency patients?
We are doing that, and
see emergency patients. I would. Would you see?
You would see emergency patients,
like people who are in pain, dire pain,
true pain. Yeah. Not the fakey one that's had minor pain for 6 months, and they just decided to come in. Howard, before I forget to do it, you have done more good in a fairly tactful way, although some hate you, some hate me too. But my bottom line is you've done more good than any other single person. And I congratulate you and Dentaltown for doing the things you do and continue to do. So stay around, will you? I'm going to stay around. I may never die. But the bottom line
I don't think he'll die. I think he'll live to be 500.
Because so back to emergency care, you're saying that it's only for patients that are in pain, severe pain. What would your exact definition of emergency care be?
You know as well as I. They call on the phone. I have a problem, and it's some dumb crown that came off, a few months ago, or it's maybe an aspirin burn that they put on thinking it would help a toothache. They're just ridiculous things. There's somebody who really has pain. I just had one yesterday, the day before, where the woman, when we did the cone beam on her, had one sinus clear, and the other one, I have never seen a total sinus filled on the cone beam. So, she's in pain, the space was swollen. That's through emergency. So antibiotic observation again. I'll see you in a few more days. Yeah, all of you know.
And then just to be clear on that, if you're only going to, somebody has to be a doctor and see someone. The hospitals are going to be open. If someone's in pain, they come into your office, they're really in pain, and you're saying that to use eyewear plus a face shield, mask, gloves, and long sleeves.
Read this thing. We've got special things there, and then I doubt if more than 1 out of 100 of you have a face mask that's adequate right now. I'm not talking about what Rella talked about. I'm talking about an N95 high filtration face mask. Most of you don't even know what I'm talking about. So you need something that actually will block these things. These things are less than 1 micron. Some of them the viruses are as much as 1/10 of a micron. You think about that. The red blood cell is 5 microns. The human hair diameter is 50 microns. So they are infinitely small. So we've got to recognize how many places could they be that you're going to be touching a patient, looking at a patient, making an aerosol. Get yourself well protected if you're going to see an emergency patient.
Rella, did you anything to add for the dent? Like I talked to an oral surgeon on Sunday, and Jay was telling me out in LA. He's booked all week with non-elective care. He's an oral surgeon in LA. What would you recommend for an office? What's that?
For non-elective.
Did you mean non-elective care?
Yeah, non-elective. Yes.
That's emergency care. Okay.
Yeah.
He better protect himself.
Well, Howard, I've been a patient for many years at Mayo Clinic, and you have one right there in Arizona, but I go to Minnesota, and there are ways to help a patient where you may or may not have to see them. They ask for photographs that can be sent on the computer, or they can be texted by phone. They try to make judgments on what needs to happen. You can, of course, prescribe based on symptoms.
Let the pharmacist get contaminated.
If the main thing, Howard, is to be careful, because as a healthcare provider, you've had years of training that's very valuable. And if you get sick, you're of no use to anyone.
Your 2,000 patients on the average go without.
And it isn't forever. We're talking here right now, we're shut down for 2 weeks to watch and see what happens, with the opportunity to shut down another 2 weeks or whatever we feel is needed. I think I wouldn't take it casually if you're older. It seems to have had a propensity to be serious in people who are 60 and older. Many other ages have contracted it, but have not been as likely to die from it.
Why? It seems like it's more men than women. Was that just China, or is that in Italy too?
That has been stated about China.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the other places. That's been part of what's caused the fear, is that the information has been spotty and contradictory. And so it makes you afraid. You don't know what to really concentrate on. I know President Trump had said, don't rush to the grocery stores and stock up. But on the other hand, they tell you if you test positive, now you've got to isolate, and you're not going to be able to go to the grocery store.
But the stores will deliver, many of them will. This very night,
Amazon is great that way, yeah.
But the grocery stores will. This very night, because of all this fracas and hysteria, for one of my columns coming up next month, I'm writing on what to do for the next one. We're going to get over this one. We'll get over it. Rella mentioned at the start how many there have been. So eventually we'll be over this one, but there'll be another one. So what do you do? And already I've got about 20 things I need to do. They're not extravagant. They're not something that you can't do. They're not expensive. They're common sense. And that shows you how I feel about it. We're relatively prepared. She stored enough food.
Gordon, there's some of my friends own lots of offices. I've been talking to Rick Workman. He has 1,000 Heartland Dental. Steve Thorne's almost got 1,000. Bob Fontana's got 1,000. To those three gentlemen who have all been on the show, what would you tell Rick, Steve, and Bob right now?
You mean the relative, expressed this question mark there.
Yeah, Bob Fontana is CEO of Aspen's 1,000 offices, Rick Workman, Heartland's 1,000, Steve Thorne.
Okay, I missed what you were saying.
Yeah,
all right.
What would you tell the three largest captains of dental delivery today? What would you tell them?
Among those three, you have upwards of 3,000 practices. You know that.
Correct.
And you take 3,000 practices times 2,000 patients per practice, and you see it's an atomic bomb ready to go on. I would suggest, and I know this is ridiculous to you because many of you are suffering already. We're suffering. We lost, just in our CE, we lost $100,000 last week. So I'm not talking through my teeth. We've closed down. And I think they need to take similar kinds of precautions. You know, if I have whatever in a course, you think about it, 200, 300, 400, you know what comes to courses. And multiply those out. They got to get stored on, bathroom, toilet, flushers, et cetera, et cetera. Let's help to control it. Let's help to level the curve. And I'm waiting at least 2 weeks. We'll reconsider right about it.
We had a case, again, reported here in Utah. A Utah man went to Colorado to a business course and returned home. And the people at the course let him know that some people at the course had tested positive. And dang if he didn't test positive. And in his interview, he was stating how guilty he felt because he was an index patient. He had brought disease into Utah, which at that time only had a couple of people from cruise ships that had returned home. And he had a young son with problems with asthma. And, he described the fact that he knew on the airplane and at the airport and in other contexts that he had exposed a number of other people. He doesn't know how many will become sick because of their exposure to him. But nevertheless, he picked it up at a course, brought it back, and there it goes. And that's, I think, what we've said over and over in this interview, Howard, is that not to take it casually, and as Gordon pointed out, to do your part to slow things down. And yes, it's going to have economic implications, absolutely, and we're all going to feel them.
Billions and billions.
Rella, in your experience, you've been in this arena with in the micro world for 3 decades. Today, U.S. researchers gave the first shot in a first experimental corona vaccine. Do you think that this is something? When do you think something like this could most likely be available? The vaccine that they tested today.
Well, I'll tell you.
I was just on with Suzuki, as I said, about an hour and a half ago. They now have an experimental vaccine in Seattle, which was the epicenter in America, as you remember, and they delivered it just this week. So those patients had to assure that they were okay taking this experimental vaccine. So it's already gurgling in the sidelines.
And Rella, some people are asking about chloroquine. That's going around the internet big time. Chloroquine, that's a drug I think they use for malaria, isn't it?
I can't comment, Howard, because I don't know about that.
The malaria drug.
And whether that'll help. Let me tell you, they're using 4 different AIDS antivirals. What they're hoping to do is to stop the replication of the virus. Probably the most promising thing I've heard of was going on at MIT, where they were trying to construct the RNA pattern man-made and have the body respond to it without it actually causing disease. If you could put together a vaccine of that type, you could make it very rapidly and get it out very rapidly. But the typical vaccine, you're using a live virus that you have to grow them up in great quantities, and then you have to attenuate it, and then you have to test it because you never know if it's going to affect people.
Gordon, you said this has already cost you $100,000 in business. How long do you think the average dental office could cash flow their bills and employees with an office closed down before the coronavirus killed the office first?
That is definitely part of my article I'm writing tonight. I think this is my opinion now. I think they need at least 2 months of saved money, practice money, not home money. I've got another thought on that. 2 months for staff salaries and for dentist salary. They don't have to be at their regular salary, but at least 2 months. Some would say more. But if you've got 2 months, usually a typical problem will go away. Maybe you've had a death in the family, you've had whatever. Those things go away relatively fast. If you've had 2 months, now see, we've been hyper on this thing about that long. And we're starting to get a hold of it. And now the states are giving money to staff and so forth. So that would be something. Now at home, no one knows how I feel. We should have a similar kind of a home salvage fund, and even some cash in case banks go. I'm not suggesting doomsday. I don't believe in it, but in case banks have a problem, That simple stuff like that. I see dentists going out buying a new car and they own one hubcap on the car. They own the doorknob on the house. That is stupidity in my mind. You need to have a store of face masks. You need to have a store of alcohol-containing materials for disinfecting. There are about 20 things that you need. And my thought is if they don't have that, it's kind of their own fault. That was the hysteria we saw in the grocery stores. I went to the grocery store middle of the week this week, and I just walked out. The line was at least 100 feet long. It was taking 2 hours for people to go through. Now, if they'd done even part of what I just said, I didn't even talk about food storage. We don't need 9 years of it, but we need at least a couple of months of food storage. So we're negligent as a profession. We spend too much.
Most of those things, Howard, can be stored. The things that are sensitive to storage would be operating gloves, but
reuse them.
The operating gloves that aren't latex store a little bit better. But things like masks and eye covering and your disinfectants, they should store just fine. So you definitely could provide.
Rella, do you think this means the death of the Cavitron was the first casualty of war from the coronavirus? I mean, you've been a hygienist for a long time. Are you going to go to the Cavitron's funeral, or?
I think it means another look at high velocity suction.
The sucker is the problem.
Howard, we actually set up a whole operatory with a laser particle counter and ran a whole bunch of experiments long before this. This was a period of years ago, and you can do amazing things with high velocity suction that is functioning properly. These office staff and the dentists need to understand the suction pump. You have staff members that have never been with where the suction pump is. Generally, it's located in places in the basement where the spiders live, and nobody wants to change the filters, and so they aren't well taken care of. But not at all. These things can honestly be handled in a very reasonable way. As Gordon said, we've perhaps been negligent.
I think.
I wanted to ask is that when teledentistry started, I think Smiles Direct Club got it on all the newspapers, and it's been the most controversial issue in all of dentistry for probably the last year, Smiles Direct Club alone. But now it looks like teledentistry is much safer than in-person dentistry.
Oh, no question. No question. Yeah, but you remember...
I don't know if that's fair, Gordon. Practice properly. There's the key. We need to re-look at what we're doing, Howard, and how we do it. The emphasis for quite a little while now has been on speed, ease and speed. We need to go back and reevaluate and see what we've had to give up. And of course, all of that is based on overhead and income. But it doesn't mean giving things up and going back to the dark ages or not doing dentistry or whatever. It means reevaluating, because I think we have the tools there. I really do.
I met with my continuing education staff this morning. By the way, we have a staff of 50 between the research in there and the continuing education. And we, as a team, felt we do not want to do away with hands-on courses. Obviously, we've eliminated those during this crisis. People want the interaction with one another. They need the interaction with one another. They learn from one another as much as they learn from maybe me or Rella in a course. So we're not going to abolish hands-on, but we're going to look very carefully at those courses that could be done without hands-on. There are some. Practice management, there are quite a few. I won't enumerate them.
Well, I'll be honest, Gordon. I would rather sit in my pajamas, sipping a soda and watching a course and taking notes than have to get on an airplane travel.
Well, I want to ask another thing. This outbreak seems to have been very different in China versus Italy versus Iran versus now in what would you say ground zero is? Would you say it was for North America, for the United States? Would you say it was Seattle?
Well, Seattle, I think we have to realize that most of the problem was in one location.
One nursing home.
And when you get a group of people who are already, number one, older, number two, debilitated,
and number three want to die, a lot of them.
Number three, you've got staff that's getting infected, and so now you're down to half your staff. You've got a real time bomb there. Was reading about one family where the father has 6 kids. So he's an older man. He had gone in actually for rehab for a foot and knee surgery and injury that he had. But in the meantime, he was also had a little dementia, and he didn't see well. I mean, he didn't even see well enough to operate a phone. And basically, he wasn't a real resident of that particular facility, but he found himself trapped there because, well, he was COVID positive, and his kids were actually yelling into him through an open window, and incidentally, he was hard of hearing as well. But you can see how the people in a situation like that, how that's a worst case scenario.
They're in jail.
Where you have a lot of people crammed into a small area. They're older, they're debilitated, and that's most of Washington. So most of the cases in Washington have come from that facility now early on. Now, who knows what's...
San Francisco is talking about closing down the quarantine starting tonight for 3 weeks. What do you make of that?
Well, that's about right, Howard. That's what we're describing. End of this month, into the first week or two of April. That's what we're describing. What I described is it peaking. I think perhaps the last week or so of April and into May, and not getting a lot of relief until June. We hope. So it's about right on. I know that I detect from your comments that you really resist this, and that a lot
I hate it.
A lot of the resistance is your high energy. You're well tuned into the economic factors, to the backup in patients with need, and so on. But it's an
okay. Final question. Let's say that we're not going to see patients for 2 weeks, and that may extend to 2 months. And you're a young dentist, and you run out of cash flow. Do you just what do you do? Do you help your employees get unemployment? Do you pray that the government's going to have a bailout? What do these young dentists with all these student loans who just bought a practice are looking at their patient flow equals cash flow? If they don't see patients, they have no cash flow. What's your fatherly advice?
May I give you my motherly advice?
Yes, please, Mom.
How would you like to accidentally infect all those new patients and have that word get around in the community?
And have lawsuits abounding since our parent organization has said, don't do it. You got it? I mean, in other words, it's clear. They're saying, don't do it. You do it. And it's, already they're indicting dentists. So if, let's say, half a dozen of the patients of yours do have positive characteristics, you're dead legally. You know that.
But Howard, we're all in it together. I think if we can understand that, I think hopefully banks will be more forgiving.
Yes, that is one thing that I wish every dentist would do, is that, when you study bankruptcies, a lot of businesses, the number one common reason to go bankrupt is cash flow. Again, like this, you have a great business, but it runs out of cash. What does cash flow mean? It means, let's say that you do a job and you're going to get paid $1 and your bills cost you $1 a month, but this person can't pay for 3 months. So you have to have $3 saved up to wait for your dollar. So you run out of cash waiting for a profitable business to pay you. Everybody should be calling their bank about their line of credit. The first thing I did when this broke out is reviewed my LOC, and then I transferred the maximum. Do this now. Is there anything else you'd recommend? So, call your banker, get a line of credit, and during an expansion, debt is leverage is king. But during a contraction, cash is king. So right now, as we're contracting, why are you paying your bills that you could pay late 30, 60, 90 days where you're going to know a lot more now? But right now, you hang on to your cash. You don't pay normal bills. I mean, look, how many patients took 30, 60, 90 days to pay you? I would stop paying all bills until I figure out what was going on. I'd rather get a late notice and have my credit dinged than run out of cash.
Of course. You just said what I was going to say as the fatherly advice. It's all about cash flow. And repenting of your previous sins, and for the next pandemonium is what I call it, have some backup.
It is a strong object lesson in a lot of ways, kind of a wake-up call, if you will.
We should have been doing this all along. Being careful.
Well, it was an honor that you guys came on. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I wasn't smart enough to ask?
Let me just remind those who came in later, you're going to get this, most of you who take the CR report or are involved with us at all, you'll get this anyway on your email. But if you don't get it on your email, there I go again, all lowercase, clinicians report, all combined, .org, and the front page of it, that's what it's looking like. It's looking like the problem. And there are at least 20 things to do in practice that we got on there. And there are at least 25 on self-protection for you and your family and your patients. And you're welcome to copy any of that stuff and give it to the patients as a handout. And I think that would be helpful. That's going to go to tens of thousands of people tonight or tomorrow. So go for it.
Well, thank you for your decades and decades of staying on top of this. And thank you for changing your schedule to come on this show during these bizarrely strange times as we all live through our first. Rella, is this already a pandemic in your mind? What is your prediction? When I talk to my dentist friends, I was supposed to lecture in Italy May 1, but when I talk to dental townies from Italy and China and Iran, it's crazy stories. But what is your prediction? If you could make a prediction, what is it going to look like a month from now? Today is St. Patrick's Day, the 21st year anniversary of Dentaltown. What is it going to look like a month from today in the United States?
Oh, in the United States.
A lot more cases will have occurred, and some will have subsided, and others will be new. But you'll have a lot more cases. Howard, is what I expect.
And last but not least, I know my homies. They're all going to say, but it's because the media doesn't talk about 20 to 80,000 Americans dying every year during the flu. And, that's all I'm hearing in Arizona. There hasn't even been one confirmed death of this, but in this year's flu season, it's already tens of thousands. So there's a lot of young dentists who are using a lot of, they're so frustrated because they're like, so I'm going to lose my office because of something that's not even half as big as the flu season, this flu. How would you answer that?
I've been there myself. That's the same thing I thought. As I told you, I've lost a bunch of cats already, and I'm going to lose another couple of weeks of it. But I feel very confident that what we've said is correct. I hate what I've said. I hate to be a doomsayer. I'm not a doomsayer. I've said right at the beginning of this is going to go away. It may not go away totally, and it may take a long time to go away, but it'll go away. But we don't want another 36 million people dying as they did with HIV/AIDS.
And Rella, what would your answer to that same question be?
Well, Howard, we're not going to know the actual percentage death rate until this has subsided. People are just making, they're giving you their opinion, but we're not going to know. As you've pointed out, in some countries, the death rate has been a lot higher. They've been a lot more prominent people. I'm talking particularly in some of the Arab states, and Italy was hit extra hard. We don't know. That's what makes it scary, and it hasn't yet peaked in the U.S. So you'd like to fight it. I hear the determination in your voice.
She lives with
Howard.
determination. I would like to kill it too.
But I think you've made a couple of good suggestions from a business point of view to meet with your banker and put things off and let the thing develop. But at the same time,
Maximize your line of credit. Cash is king. Stop paying your bills. This is all new. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was just an honor and a privilege on the 21st birthday of Dentaltown to have Pierre Fichard and GV Black showing up in their costumes as Gordon and Rella.
So keep doing it, okay?
All right, buddy. Tell Mikey and Will hello too. How are they doing? How's Mikey and Will doing?
Doing well, yeah, no problem. No problem.
Mike is shut down up in Canada. In case you're wondering what's going on in Canada, he's shut down up there.
Well, we had some Canadians. The last hands-on course that I'm giving for a while, we're going all virtual, was last week, and we had some Canadians, and they're quarantined as soon as they go back for 2 weeks minimum. Yeah, when they go back to Canada.
Just because they've been to the U.S. and we have more cases. Yeah.
So it's everywhere.
All right. Well, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.